As news that Jim Fassel, former Giants head coach, passed away at the age of 71. Wish it was under better terms, but we welcome aboard right now Tiki Barber, who joins the program now. Good afternoon, Tiki. Thank you for giving us a couple minutes this afternoon.
Moose, Maggie, it's my pleasure. How are you guys doing?
So sorry for your loss, Tiki. I mean, I imagine this had to be a shock. Have you been, in touch with other teammates and stuff today, remembering Coach Fassel?
I have not, and I haven't talked to Coach in about a year. It was interesting when he called me again about a year ago. It was pre-pandemic, but he said, "Tiki, I want you to help me get into the Giants Ring of Honor." And I think I could tell he was saying it with a smile, but obviously he had a lot of success with the New York Giants, and we did go to a Super Bowl and has one of the winning records, best records as a Giant head coach. And it saddens me because I lost touch with him after that. I mean, obviously the world went kind of crazy, as we all remember, for the last 15 months, and he's one of those guys who meant so much to my career and ultimately to my life. And I regret not reaching out and saying something to him. Obviously, 71 is way too young for someone to pass away. And he seemed healthy and happy, and his life was he was living it up in Las Vegas. And to die of a heart attack, it was shocking for me to hear this morning.
Tiki, speak to that a little bit. Your relationship with Coach Fassel here with the Giants. What separated him as a head coach? Why do you enjoy playing for him as much as you did?
Well, I was his second pick overall. I mean, he became a Giant head coach in '97, and I found this out subsequently from Jim Skipper, my running back coach, that he and the organization had a debate about whether to draft me in the first round at number 7 in that year, or what I would last into the second round. And Skipper always jokes with me because he was like, "Jim wanted to take you. Jim loved me. Like he's like, Jim loved you. He wanted to take you with the 7th overall pick. Maybe it would have been an overdraft, but who cares? He really wanted me." And Jim Skipper told him, "Coach, I think you can get Tiki in the second round." And he was right. And so Jim always tells me, "Skipper, I cost you some money in that first round." But, it was okay because it put me in a position to be hungry. But I knew that Jim had a plan for me, and he always saw, something greater than what was portrayed for me. You guys remember, New York Giants fans will remember, I was the next Dave Meggett type, right? The kick returner, punt returner, maybe do some third down stuff, but he saw me as something greater than that, and eventually I did become greater than that, and I'm forever thankful because it wasn't easy, man. I mean, there were some times over those first few years where the Giants had enough of me, and they were trying to replace me over and over and over again until 2000 when we drafted Ron Dane, who just won the Heisman Trophy, and the writing was on the wall, but Jim kept with me, man. He kept pushing me, and as I tweeted this morning, he'd give me a hug when I needed that encouragement, but he'd kick my ass when he knew I needed to do better. And ultimately, it worked out for him and for us, as that 2000 season we all remember was epic.
Tiki Barber is our guest. Tiki, as you're talking about Jim Fassel, I mean, aren't anyone in your life, you're just so lucky when you can find people who are really in your corner. People who are really supporting you and really want the best for you. Any of us would be lucky to have one or two of those people along the way. And the fact that Jim Fassel was that guy for you, I mean, just really drives home how special he was. And showing the faith in the team as he did, with his famous, guarantee, right? And guaranteeing that you guys are going to make the playoffs. And we've talked about that story before, Tiki. You said, really? Are we that desperate that we need a guarantee speech right before Thanksgiving?
Yeah, we did, though.
What do you remember about that?
Yeah, it's funny what you said, Mag, about him believing in me. I remember when he first told me that I was going to start. So I started my rookie season. My first game was against the Philadelphia Eagles. I'll never forget it. It was the morning after Princess Diana passed away, and it was a heavy day, and it was an exciting day personally. And I had a pretty decent day that game, and it was like, all right, my career's off, and then it went to hell. Injuries, etc. But he was always there. He would tell me, "Teague, don't worry about being the starter. Just worry about being a great third down back. Don't worry about being a great punt returner." And I became one of those. I had 50, 60, 70 receptions in seasons and led the league in punt returns one year. And eventually it led to the greater opportunity in 2000 that you're talking about. And it started because of him and Sean Payton deciding to change our offense and create this two-headed monster between me and Ron Dane. Thunder and lightning it became.
Yeah.
Mainly because if Sean Ron wanted me in the game, it was Lightning, personnel, 21 or 11 or whatever it was. If he wanted Ron, it was Thunder. And that first game of that season was against the Arizona Cardinals, and it literally thundered and lightning, and to the point they had to empty the stadium because it was dangerous for fans. And we had a day against Arizona that day. But as that season went on, I mean, we started strong. I mean, I think it was three or so wins, and we had a good early part in the season. And all of a sudden, things just started to slip. And in that Detroit Lions game, it was egregious. We were bad, and nobody was focused. And Jim does his guarantee speech, pushing the chips into the center of the table, as I'm sure you guys have played. And I remember us as a team, we were like, what the hell is he talking about, man? But it was genius, right? Because, he was constantly on the hot seat, always. Even if we had a good season, he was constantly on the hot seat. And if we had faltered that season, he's getting fired, and he knew it, right? And if he says what he says and he gets fired and we lose, then it's forgotten. But when it actually came true and we go on this 7-game run and we get to the Super Bowl, he becomes a genius, and that becomes legendary. And I think what it ultimately did, though, it made people say, man, this coach is insane. What the hell is wrong with him? And so all of that pressure that was on us as players was now on him as a head coach. And it was like he deflected it, you know what I mean? And I think that helped us refocus. And so that run down the stretch it was amazing.
It really was. Tiki, are you surprised that Jim never got another opportunity to be a coach in the NFL after the Giants?
I'm surprised. I understand it though. Just behind the scenes stuff. I get it. I know that the greatest opportunity was in Washington, where and Jim told me this story firsthand. So I don't feel bad telling it. He was asked, Jim, you're going to be the head coach. Tell us who you want to hire as a defensive coordinator and as an offensive coordinator. And so he went through this whole process. He laid out who he would hire. And offensive coordinator, he chose Jim Zorn. And Washington, not surprisingly, double-crossed him in a sense and went and hired Jim Zorn, which lasted, half a cup of coffee, right? But
Zorn was awful.
He was terrible. He wasn't. Maybe he was a good offensive coordinator. He wasn't ready to be a head coach, but for whatever reason, they jumped over Jim and hired Jim Zorn, and that was really it. And I know he got another chance with Brian Billick as a coordinator and. For a little bit, but I was disheartened that he didn't get another chance because he was a I'm not gonna say he's a great coach, but he was a great teacher and a great friend to have as a player, because he would believe in you and he'd trust in you and he'd bring loyalty. At least that was my experience. And I think young teams or developing teams need a coach like that sometimes, but he would also be hard when he needed to be. And I remember all the good things. There were some bad things. We're all flawed as humans, and he was as well. But he was a great man to me. He was a great friend. And I think that, those in the media who covered him knew that he would sit there and talk to you, man. He'd answer every question. He wouldn't run away from it, the good or the bad.
Yeah, and Tiki, that's the one thing that, that kind of hits you with everybody on social media reacting to the sad news of Jim's passing, is that they talked about the fact of how much he loved being the Giant head coach, right? Yeah. How easily accessible he was as a head coach, right? How he was a good communicator. His greatest strength, we often kind of pigeonhole coaches and say, well, he's a disciplinarian or this guy's a player's coach. Mm-hmm. When you played for Jim, how would you define him as a head coach?
Not a disciplinarian, because I fumble 3 times in a game and he's still like putting me back in there. He's not even yelling at me. He's just like, he would just encourage me. He's like, so I don't know. It's like I don't want to say he was a father figure because that's cliche-ish, but to me he was. He advocated for me and he supported me and he lifted me when I felt like I was down. So he was encouraging, and that was something that I think is lost because it's such a, like a manly sport, and you got to be a certain way, and you got to be tough and physical and mean, and but he was just real. He'd get pissed off reading the newspaper, like, these guys think that we can't. He'd be looking at the lines like they got us as a 10-point underdog. It's like, what are you talking about, coach? But he was just real, and I appreciated that. Like, be transparent with me. Right? Don't put on some facade because you think you're supposed to be a certain way. And he was never that way. And I think that I appreciated that most about him.
Yeah, obviously, and it worked out. Just last one for me, Tiki, and again, really appreciate you coming on to share your thoughts on Jim Fassel. The impact that he had on quarterbacks, though, and especially Kerry Collins, was
That's right.
what?
Yeah, I mean, it was profound. We all remember that Kerry Collins drama prior to becoming the Giants head coach, and all of the negativity that's surrounding him and his personality. And part of this is due to Ernie believing in Kerry and telling us as veterans, accept him for who he is. Like, don't have any prejudgment about him. Just meet him, understand him, and then make a decision about him. And Kerry was one of the great human beings that we brought into this organization, the Giants did. And he led us to a Super Bowl, and he was fantastic for us. And, I hate how it ended with him, but I get it. It's just the nature of the business. And, Jim was one of these guys who he was smart in delegating, right? And that's a hard thing to do sometimes for offensive-minded coaches, because he was a coordinator. Obviously, he had a history with John Elway out in Denver, and even here in New York as a coordinator. And so it became this team effort to turn Kerry into a top-end quarterback. And it was part Sean Payton, obviously, as the offensive coordinator, but it was also part Jason Garrett, now the Giants offensive coordinator, who was backup quarterback, but kind of like that assistant in Kerry's head. And so just the structure that he put around, the support system that he was able to put around Kerry allowed him to thrive, and we all benefited from it. And he had a couple of really great seasons, with us. The one thing that I'll speak to that you haven't brought up, but I think is probably one of the most important parts of his legacy, Moose and Maggie, is how he handled 9/11 with this team. I mean, it was a devastating moment emotionally for everybody, but for us as well, because we practiced right over the site, right? And we could see it from our practice field, the World Trade Center site, and it was smoking when we went back to practice on that Wednesday. And, he was part of, with Jason and Strahan, Jason Sehorn and Strahan, of getting that game canceled, and then going above and beyond to get us on buses a few days later and go down to the site and see these workers working who, they were so dialed in to recovery efforts, and they couldn't let go. But like our presence there gave them a bit of relief, which set us up for obviously one of the great games in our franchise's history when we went out to Kansas City that following week. And we won, obviously, but the Kansas City fans out in Arrowhead are notoriously brutal. They were so welcoming and supportive of us, and we won that game. And I can still see that picture, right, in the locker room. We're all like, I don't know, it's one of those moments that you just never forget, like playing in the national anthem that day, and in the locker room after the game, we all have these NYPD and FDNY hats on, and it's just it's one of those moments that he doesn't get mentioned enough in his legacy, because he helped the city heal in a lot of ways.
Yeah, he certainly did, and you as a team as well. And Tiki, you mentioned yourself, Sehorn, Strahan, Shockey there for a quick spell.
Amani.
I mean, you look at all the Keith Hamilton, Amani. I mean, the personalities that were on the Giants at that time as well. You mentioned him being a father figure. I mean, he was also dealing with a lot of guys that had a lot of distinct personalities at that time as well, and made their presence be known.
Oh, yeah. You mean, you like to talk about Howard Cross, who was a tight end. They wanted to move him to tackle. Hey, that was pre-tight end days where you guys are stretching the field. You not even mentioned Tito Wooten, Felipe Sparks, and like some of these characters who were just Mo Lewis. I mean, there were some dudes on that team that were insane. You'd want them on your side in a fight. Let's put it that way. But there were also guys like me and Amani, and it was so diverse. Our locker room. Jesse Palmer was in there as well. I mean, it's so he had to be a chameleon in a lot of ways, and I'm sure he didn't treat everybody the same way he treated me, but I knew I was always getting the straight shooter, and that's what mattered most.
Tiki, last one would be this: for those that never met Jim, never played for him, that are looking back, the young Giant fan, what do you want them to remember most about Fassel?
He was dead serious about winning, but he was also kind and understanding when things were not going the right way. It's hard to be both. You know what I mean? It's hard to be committed to putting the best product, but also understanding when guys make mistakes, because it's not the culture that a lot of football organizations espouse. He was unique. I'll put it that way. He was unique.
Tiki, can't thank you enough. We appreciate the time. I know it's a hard day for you and for the Giant family. Thanks for the time this afternoon.
My pleasure, guys. Be well.